For years, they swore they'd expose the truth. They said the files would come out, that the names would finally see the light of day. But when it was finally their turn to deliver, the story changed. Suddenly, the same people who once promised transparency were silent. And when one senator stepped forward to demand those hidden files be released, the response inside the Senate chamber revealed just how deep the secrecy still runs. This isn't just another political debate. This is about whether power protects itself or whether the truth finally wins. Because if the system can hide evidence tied to one of the darkest scandals in recent history, what else is being buried in plain sight? It started with a resolution. Simple on paper, explosive in meaning. It required the Department of Justice to release every file connected to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yesterday that Trump is in the Epstein files, and he knows it. The truth is coming out, and the cover-up is crumbling. So I'm here again, and my request is very simple. The Senate should go on record supporting the release of the Epstein files. Any effort to block their release is simply a continued cover-up of our nation's elites. While I stand here on the Senate floor demanding answers, House Republicans have ran for the exit, ended their term early, skipping town early to avoid taking up any more discussion about Epstein and the files. They didn't just punt accountability, they literally fled Washington, D.C. While everyday Americans are struggling to afford their groceries and their health care, we have a president in the White House focused on protecting the most powerful men and women who preyed on children. This is who Donald Trump really is. He campaigns as a man of the people. When it comes down to it, he is a servant of the powerful and the elite. He built a movement claiming to fight those same elites, and now he is protecting them every way possible. And the American people are seeing right through it. They spent years listening to Trump promise that he was going to release the Epstein files, and now he is mocking them every day for even believing him and all his lies. But the American people are not stupid. They know something is off. They smell it. If Donald Trump really wants these files released, they'd be out already. Instead, he's orchestrating a cover-up, and he is not acting alone. The entire Republican Party, the FBI director, the intelligence community, and the Justice Department are backing him up to bury the truth. They're doing it because they're doing everything they can to keep the truth buried because they know who's in those documents, and they want to protect them and his friends. So today, I'm calling on my colleagues to stand with me and stand on the side of the American people, not the pedophile elites that they are trying to protect, and call on the Justice Department to release these files. It is that simple. If there's nothing to hide, then come out and prove it. As if in legislation, and notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent of the Committee on Judiciary be discharged from further consideration, and the Senate now proceed to consideration of S.R. 325. Further, I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that in the motions to consider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President,
The senator from Oklahoma is recognized.
I reserve the right to object. As we hear my colleague from Arizona use, I'd say, very liberal truths to what he was saying by not giving all the facts, I'd also propose a question: where was all this outrage over the last 4 years when Director Wray was over the FBI and Attorney General Garland was over the DOJ? He knows, I know, and all the Democrats know that if there was anything to do with President Trump, they would have happily released it. My Lord, you went after him for everything else you could possibly think of. Why wouldn't you possibly go after this? Well, it's because this is nothing but political theater. We know that. We know that what your resolution does is it doesn't actually have transparency, because we all want transparency. All of us want transparency. We want to know actually what happened. The American people want to know what's happened. But what this resolution does is it actually is a blurred line between the separation of powers. When we start dictating to the Department of Justice what they can and can't do, there's a clear separation of power. We're the legislative branch. That's what we do. We make laws. We can't dictate other branches on what they must and how they must do their job. Now, with that being said, I would simply ask the question, why now? Is it because their hatred towards President Trump? Because they want to do anything they can possibly do to distract what they might be hiding? Why wasn't this done the previous 4 years? What happened? They had the same files. This case wasn't new. So this resolution does absolutely nothing, and therefore I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President,
Senator from Arizona has the floor.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object. Sorry. Okay.
If you want to respond just in this moment, you can.
actually, I should have the floor, right?
Sure. Mr. President, in response to the Senator for Oklahoma, the reason we are here and the reason why there is a request of this nature is because there is one and only one administration and one campaign that ran for more than 8 years that vilified DOJ employees that were consistently trying to do their best jobs and then started a conspiracy theory that has affected hundreds of people across this country. A conspiracy theory that caused people to start doing shootings at pizza places, that accused other people and other politicians of being pedophiles, and then said and campaigned that if you elect me, I will release the Trump files. That was only one campaign, and that was the Trump campaign. So now, as he is in power, as he has gotten power, he has specifically said he would release his campaign. He had an attorney general that said, I have now the files on my desk right now, and I will be releasing it. And soon as we heard, first from Elon Musk, that Trump himself is in the files, and all of a sudden we started seeing the cover-up starting. First he wasn't, then he was, then it was created by somebody else, then it's coming after him. This is all because the president has to answer to the American public. Did you lie for those 8 years and put all these employees, all these innocent people at risk to cover up for your elite friends? Or is there something in the file you are trying to hide to protect your friends? Because this whole issue has been started because of only one person and one campaign has made this a campaign issue. That is why the American public is demanding this. That is why the Republican House of Representatives has fled Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. I have not heard of House of Representatives leaving Washington, D.C. since we had to get away from the redcoats. But that's what happened because this president wants to avoid accountability, and this president wants to continue to cover up for his elite friend.
The goal was accountability, to show the public who had been protected and who had been betrayed. The same files that politicians and public figures had spent years talking about, promising to expose, were now being demanded officially on the Senate floor. The senator pushing it spoke with conviction. He reminded everyone that these were not random papers, but documents that could reveal how far the network of power and privilege went. The message was simple. If there's nothing to hide, prove it. Release the files. Show the truth. But that's where the walls started closing in. Because just as the motion reached the floor, another voice rose from across the chamber, a senator from Oklahoma. He stood up, not to support transparency, but to block it. His objection was immediate. He called the resolution political theater. He said it was nothing more than a stunt, that those demanding truth were simply trying to score points. And that's when the room changed. It wasn't just a disagreement. It was exposure. On one side stood those asking for sunlight. On the other stood those defending the shadows. The same people who once shouted for the release of the files were now labeling that very demand a distraction. That left everyone wondering, what changed? Why had those who once promised to expose the powerful now turned into the very gatekeepers they swore to fight? This wasn't about party lines anymore. It was about power protecting itself, because those Epstein files aren't just paperwork, they're evidence. They're a record of who met with him, who funded him, who turned a blind eye. They hold the details that survivors have spent years begging the world to confront. For them, those pages are not political. They're personal. Each document could validate a testimony, confirm a timeline, or expose the connections that allowed one man's empire of abuse to thrive. For the public, they represent proof of whether the system treated these crimes seriously or whether privilege quietly erased accountability. And that's why the silence feels so heavy. When leaders claim they have nothing to hide but still fight transparency, It sends one clear message. Something inside those files could cause real damage. The senator's resolution was more than symbolic. It was a test of integrity. It forced the chamber to choose between principle and protection. It asked whether institutions exist to protect people or to protect themselves. But as the debate continued, it became clear that the obstacle wasn't just politics. It was law. Releasing law enforcement files isn't as simple as hitting publish. There are legal walls, some legitimate, and others conveniently vague. Grand jury materials are shielded by strict rules that only a court can override. Files can contain sensitive victim statements, medical records, or ongoing investigative details. Those protections exist for good reason, when they're used honestly, but too often, they become the perfect excuse. Privacy protections can morph into power shields. Redactions can erase names that matter most. The very rules meant to defend victims are twisted to defend the powerful. And when the people responsible for deciding what gets released are tied to those same power structures, transparency becomes selective. That's how the system hides in plain sight. It doesn't deny the truth. It buries it under procedure that a responsible release of the Epstein files could still protect victims' identities while exposing the networks that enabled him. Redactions can safeguard privacy without erasing accountability. Independent oversight could ensure no one edits history behind closed doors. But when a senator calls even that political theater, it tells you everything about which side of history they're standing on. Because let's be honest, if these files truly cleared the powerful, they'd already be public, and the secrecy doesn't stop there. Just days before this debate, reports surfaced that one of the lead prosecutors in the Epstein investigation had been suddenly fired, without explanation. No public reason, no transition notice, no clarity. Just gone. That detail matters. Because every time a key investigator is removed, it weakens the chain of accountability. It raises questions about who wanted that investigation quieted and why. It's not just bureaucratic reshuffling. It's erasure in real time. When oversight collapses, the truth goes with it. That's why this resolution was so important. It wasn't about politics. It was about forcing a system to confront what it had avoided for years. It was about saying, if justice still means anything, it must be visible. But instead of unity, the chamber fell into silence and spin. Those objecting to transparency offered no alternate plan, no proposal for partial disclosure, no timeline for redacted release. Just the same dismissive line. This is political theater. It's a phrase designed to end the conversation, not advance it. And yet, outside those walls, the conversation is louder than ever. Survivors, activists, and everyday citizens want one thing: answers. Not rumors, not speculation, but proof. Because for them, this isn't abstract. It's not about politics or optics. It's about knowing that the system that failed them won't keep hiding behind bureaucracy. When survivors see politicians who once promised truth now defending secrecy, it's more than betrayal. It's re-traumatization. Every delay, every blocked vote, every hidden document sends the same message. Your pain is less important than our power. That's what makes this fight so raw. Because the moment the files are released, truthfully, completely, the narrative changes forever. It's no longer about what people claim. It's about what the evidence shows. And that's exactly what many in power fear, because those pages could reveal not just who enabled Epstein, but how institutions themselves were structured to look away. They could expose the relationships between prosecutors, donors, and policymakers who all had reasons to pretend not to see. That's why this debate matters far beyond one case. If the government can withhold evidence from one of the most documented abuse networks in modern history, it sets a dangerous precedent. Today it's the Epstein files. Tomorrow, it could be any case involving corporate corruption, political misconduct, or institutional failure. Transparency isn't just about exposing individuals. It's about protecting democracy from secrecy. Because sunlight doesn't destroy institutions. It disinfects them. The irony is almost unbearable. Those who once ran entire campaigns demanding that these files be made public are now standing in the way. The slogans about truth and justice have faded into silence. The outrage that once fueled rallies has been replaced by excuses that it's the perfect cycle of power. Promise exposure when it benefits you, deny it when it doesn't. But the public isn't fooled anymore. People remember the promises. They remember the press conferences and the hashtags and the claims that the files were ready, sitting on a desk, waiting to be released. And now that someone is finally demanding that release, the same voices call it grandstanding. That's not just hypocrisy, it's confession. Because no one fights this hard to hide something that doesn't matter. This moment on the Senate floor wasn't about one vote or one resolution. It was a test of how far institutions will go to protect themselves. And the outcome revealed something chilling. The resistance to transparency isn't about procedure, it's about fear. Fear of what's in those files. Fear of what they'll confirm. Fear that the truth will finally connect the dots between the powerful and the protected. That fear explains everything. The deflections, the delays, the firings, and the endless claims that now isn't the right time. But justice doesn't wait for the right time. It demands it. And make no mistake, this story isn't over. Even though the resolution was blocked, pressure is building. Legal experts are already exploring alternative routes. Court motions to unseal, congressional subpoenas, and independent review panels that can bypass political gatekeeping. That it's not about vengeance. It's about accountability. Because when institutions hide behind secrecy, they lose public trust. And when trust dies, democracy follows. The only way back is transparency. Real, uncomfortable, all-encompassing transparency. That's what this senator's resolution symbolized. Not partisanship, but principle. A simple act of honesty in a system addicted to denial. In the end, every society has to choose. Do we protect people, or do we protect power? Do we stand with survivors who've waited decades for the truth, or with politicians who call honesty theater? The answer will define more than this one case. It will define what kind of country we become. Because justice isn't just what happens in courtrooms. It's what happens in daylight. And when that daylight is blocked by those sworn to deliver it, every citizen has a right to ask why. The truth still exists. It's in those files. It's in the hands of those who promised us honesty. And it's only a matter of time before someone finds the courage to release it. Until then, all we can do is keep asking, keep pushing, and keep shining light where others prefer shadows. Because the truth doesn't vanish just because it's inconvenient. It waits, patiently, until someone finally opens the door. If you want to see that door opened, if you want real explanations, deeper investigations, and stories that hold power accountable, make sure you're subscribed. Like this video, share it, and stay tuned. Because we're not done. We'll keep following every hearing, every motion, and every attempt to silence the truth. Justice only happens when people refuse to look away. And here, we don't look away.